The microscope's display showed patterns that should not exist, Dr. Emily. Watson rubbed her tired eyes and looked again at the genetic sequence floating on the holographic screen. After 3 months of analyzing DNA samples from dozens of species across the galaxy, she had become familiar with the natural chaos of evolution. Random mutations, environmental adaptations, the messy fingerprints of time and survival. But this was different. This was organized. The human DNA sample glowed softly. In the containment field, its double helix rotating slowly as the computer mapped every nucleotide. Emily had requested her own genetic material as a control group, something to compare against the alien samples she was studying aboard the research vessel Terra Nova. What she found made no sense at all. Embedded within the human genome were sequences that looked artificial. Not just unusual or rare, but deliberately placed there by someone with advanced knowledge of genetic engineering. The sequences were too perfect, too purposeful to be natural. They contained mathematical patterns that reminded her of the encryption codes used in quantum computers. Tom Rivers, her research assistant, floated through the lab's zero-gravity environment carrying a tray of coffee bulbs. His cheerful expression faded when he saw Emily's face. "Another headache from staring at those screens too long?" Tom asked, securing himself to a nearby handrail. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to the display. "See these marker sequences? They're not random? Someone put them there?" Tom pushed closer to examine the data. He had been working with Emily for 2 years and trusted her instincts completely. She had never made wild claims or jumped to conclusions without solid evidence. If she said something was wrong, something was definitely wrong. "Put them where exactly?" Tom asked. "In human DNA, in every human DNA sample I've tested so far, including my own." Emily's voice carried a mixture of excitement and fear. "These markers match patterns I've seen in the oldest archaeological samples we have from ancient ruins across the galaxy." The ancient ruins were a mystery that had puzzled xenorchaeologists for decades. Scattered across hundreds of worlds, the structures were clearly built by the same species, but were millions of years old. The builders had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only empty cities and technology that still functioned but could not be understood or replicated by any modern species. Tom's eyes widened as he began to understand what Emily was suggesting. "You think humans are connected to the ancient builders somehow?" "I think humans might be their descendants. Or their creation. Look at this." Emily manipulated the display to show a comparison chart. The genetic markers in human DNA are nearly identical to the quantum signatures we detect from ancient technology. It's like someone took the same mathematical principles used to build those ruins and wrote them into our genetic code. The implications were staggering. Humanity had only achieved interstellar travel 50 years ago and had been welcomed into the galactic community as a young species, still learning its place among the stars. Earth's scientists had always assumed that human evolution was purely natural, shaped by millions of years of random chance on a single world. But if Emily was right, humans were not just another species that had stumbled into space travel. They were the inheritors of the galaxy's most advanced ancient civilization. "We need to run more tests," Emily said, already pulling up additional samples. "I want to check human DNA from different populations on Earth. If these markers are universal among humans, then ... An alarm suddenly echoed through the ship. The research vessel's emergency lighting activated, bathing the lab in red. Emily and Tom looked at each other with growing concern. The Terra Nova was deep in neutral space, far from any conflict zones or dangerous phenomena. "All crew report to stations immediately," came the voice of Captain Morris over the intercom. "We have unknown vessels approaching at high speed." "This is not a drill?" Emily quickly began saving her research data to multiple storage devices. Her scientific training told her to preserve the evidence, but her instincts told her they might be in serious danger. She had been so focused on her discovery that she hadn't considered who might want to keep such information secret. Tom helped her gather the physical samples while the ship's engines powered up around them. Through the lab's small viewport, they could see distant lights moving against the stars. Ships were approaching fast, more ships than a simple research vessel should encounter in empty space. Emily, if someone doesn't want this information to get out, we might be the only ones who know the truth, Tom said as he sealed the sample containers. She nodded and activated the ship's long-range communication system. The data transmission would take several minutes to reach Earth, but it might be their only chance to share what they had discovered. As the upload began, Emily watched the approaching ships grow larger and more threatening. The Galactic Council maintained strict protocols about archaeological research and genetic studies. Officially, these rules existed to prevent the exploitation of ancient sites and protect species privacy. But Emily was beginning to suspect there were other reasons for such tight control over information about the galaxy's past. Upload complete, the computer announced just as the ship shuddered from some kind of impact. Warning shots. Captain Morris's voice came over the intercom again. They want us to stop and prepare for boarding. All research staff, secure your materials and prepare for inspection. Emily looked at the genetic data still displayed on her screen. The artificial markers glowed like a secret written in humanities. Blood? A message from the past that someone clearly didn't want them to read? She deleted the files from the ship's computer and pocketed the storage devices containing her research. Whatever was about to happen, she was determined that the truth about human origins would not die with her. The galaxy deserved to know that humanity was not just another young species learning to walk among the stars. They were something far more significant, something that powerful forces were willing to kill to keep secret. As armed figures in environmental suits began cutting through the Terra Nova's hull, Emily realized that her simple research project had uncovered one of the galaxy's most dangerous secrets. The question now was whether she would live long enough to understand what it all meant. The escape pod tumbled through space like a damaged satellite, its hull scarred by energy weapon burns. Inside the cramped compartment, Dr. Emily Watson struggled to stop the bleeding from a gash on Tom River's forehead while their small craft drifted toward the frontier planet of New Haven. Behind them, the Terra Nova burned like a dying star. The research vessel had been destroyed just minutes after the mysterious attackers boarded it, killing everyone except Emily and Tom, who had managed to reach the emergency pod during the chaos. Now they were alone in hostile space with nothing but the research data Emily had hidden in her jacket and the growing certainty that someone very powerful wanted them dead. "How bad is it?" Tom asked, his voice weak from blood loss and shock. "You'll live, but we need proper medical attention soon," Emily replied, applying pressure to his wound. "The pod's autopilot is taking us to New Haven. It's the closest inhabited system." New Haven was a frontier colony world, home to about 50,000 human settlers and a few hundred alien traders who operated the orbital stations. It was exactly the kind of remote location where two fugitive scientists might be able to hide while they figured out their next move. The planet's surface appeared through the pod's small viewport as they entered the atmosphere. Rolling hills covered in purple vegetation stretched toward distant mountains, while scattered settlements dotted the landscape like small islands of human civilization. It looked peaceful, almost pastoral compared to the sterile research labs Emily was used to. Their pod crashed in a field outside the main colony, its damaged systems barely managing a controlled landing. Emily helped Tom out of the wreckage just as a ground vehicle approached from the settlement. The driver was a middle-aged woman with the weathered look of someone who had spent years working under an alien sun. "Medical emergency," Emily called out as the woman climbed down from her vehicle. "My friend needs help." "I'm Maria Santos, colony administrator," the woman replied, already pulling medical supplies from her vehicle. "What happened to your ship?" Emily hesitated. How much could she trust a stranger? How much should she reveal about what they had discovered? Before she could answer, Maria was examining Tom's injuries with practiced efficiency. "This looks like weapon damage," Maria said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Energy burns on the pod, trauma injuries consistent with a ship attack. You two are in some kind of trouble. The kind of trouble that follows people who learn things they shouldn't know," Emily admitted. Maria nodded as if she understood completely. Frontier colonies attracted all kinds of people running from all kinds of problems. She helped load Tom into her vehicle without asking further questions. But Emily could see the woman calculating risks and possibilities behind her eyes. The colony's medical center was small but well-equipped. While the doctor treated Tom's injuries, Emily found herself pacing in the waiting area, unable to shake the feeling that they were still being hunted. Every time someone entered the building, she tensed. Expecting to see armed figures in environmental suits, her fears proved justified when Maria approached her with a grim expression and a communication device in her hand. "We just received a priority message from the Galactic Council," Maria said quietly. "They're looking for 2 dangerous fugitives who stole classified research data and destroyed a Council research vessel. They're offering a substantial reward for information leading to your capture." Emily felt her heart sink. Someone was already spinning the story, making her and Tom look like criminals instead of victims. The official version would be believed throughout the galaxy while the truth remained buried. "That's not what happened," Emily began, but Maria held up a hand to stop her. "I don't care what happened," Maria said. "What I care about is that 3 Council enforcement ships just entered our system and they're demanding permission to search the colony. That tells me you've got something they want very badly." Emily pulled the data storage devices from her jacket. "Such small objects to contain such dangerous knowledge. This is genetic research that proves humans are descended from the ancient builders. The Council has been hiding this information for decades." Maria stared at the devices as if they were weapons. In a way, Emily realized they were. Information could be more dangerous than any gun or bomb, especially information that could change how an entire galaxy viewed humanity's place in the universe. "The ancient builders," Maria repeated slowly. "The ones who left all those ruins scattered across space. The same ones. The genetic markers are identical. Humans aren't just another young species that stumbled into space travel. We're the inheritors of the galaxy's most advanced civilization." Before Maria could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the colony. Through the medical center's windows, they could see 3 large ships descending through the atmosphere. The vessels were sleek and military in design, clearly built for enforcement rather than exploration. "They're here," Emily said unnecessarily. Maria made a decision that would change the fate of everyone on New Haven. Instead of turning Emily over to the Council forces, she activated the colony's emergency protocols. Within minutes, every able-bodied colonist was arming themselves and taking defensive positions. "Why are you helping us?" Emily asked as they moved toward the colony's command center. "Because I've seen what the Council does to colonies that don't cooperate," Maria replied. "And because if what you're saying is true, then humanity has been living a lie for 50 years. People deserve to know the truth about what they are." The first Council enforcement team landed near the colony's main gate. They were tall, reptilian beings in advanced combat armor, carrying weapons that could level buildings. At their head walked a figure Emily recognized from news broadcasts, General Kex of the Altarian Empire, one of the Council's most ruthless military commanders. "Attention human colonists," Kex's amplified voice echoed across the settlement. "You are harboring dangerous criminals. Surrender them immediately and your colony will be spared." Emily watched through the command center's monitors as Kex's forces took positions around the colony. There were too many of them, too well armed and trained for a group of farmers and traders to resist, but the colonists didn't back down. They had chosen their side. "This is bigger than just us now," Emily said to Tom, who had insisted on leaving the medical center despite his injuries. "If we can get this information to Earth, to other human colonies, the truth will spread faster than the Council can contain it." Tom nodded, checking his sidearm with shaking hands. "Then we better make sure we survive long enough to see it happen." Outside, General Kex was losing patience. Emily could see him giving orders to his troops, preparing for an assault that would devastate the small colony. But she could also see something else. Human determination in the faces of the colonists, the same stubborn refusal to give up that had carried their species from a single world to the stars. Maybe that determination was part of their ancient heritage too. The underground tunnels beneath New Haven had been discovered during the colony's first year, but nobody had paid them much attention. They appeared to be natural cave formations, interesting to geologists but useless for practical purposes. Now, as Emily Watson crawled through the narrow passages with Tom Rivers and a dozen armed colonists, she realized how wrong everyone had been. The walls were too smooth, the angles too precise for natural formation. These weren't caves at all. They were corridors, built by the same hands that had constructed the ancient ruins scattered across the galaxy. New Haven had been established on top of an ancient builder site, and nobody had recognized it for what it was. "There," Emily whispered, pointing toward a faint glow emanating from a chamber ahead. "That light isn't natural either." The group emerged into a vast underground hall that took Emily's breath away. Columns of some unknown material stretched from floor to ceiling, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform containing what looked like a control console, its surface alive with softly pulsing lights. "I've never seen anything like this," said David Park, one of the colonists, who had joined their escape through the tunnels. "We've been living on top of this place for 5 years and never knew it existed." Emily approached the console carefully, her heart racing with excitement and fear. The symbols on its surface were the same ones she had seen in photographs from other ancient sites, but these were active, responsive, as if the entire structure was waiting for something. Tom pulled out a scanner to record what they were seeing. "The energy readings are off the charts. This place is drawing power from somewhere, and it's been doing it for a very long time." Above them, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the tunnels. General Kex's forces had entered the colony and were systematically searching every building. Maria Santos and the remaining defenders were buying them time, but not much of it. "We need to understand what this place is," Emily said, moving closer to the console. "If it's connected to the ancient builders, it might hold answers about human origins." As she reached toward the glowing surface, Tom grabbed her arm. "Emily, wait, we don't know what that thing does. It could be dangerous." She looked at him with determination that surprised them both. "Tom, we're probably going to die down here anyway. If this console can provide proof about human heritage, then touching it might be worth the risk." Before he could protest further, Emily placed her palm on the console's surface. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Light erupted from the platform, filling the chamber with brilliant energy that made everyone shield their eyes. The symbols on the walls began moving faster, rearranging themselves into new patterns that somehow felt familiar to Emily despite being completely alien. Then the visions began. Emily saw images flooding her mind. Vast cities spanning entire continents, populated by beings that looked remarkably similar to humans but taller, more graceful, with eyes that held ancient wisdom. She watched as these beings, the architects as they called themselves, seeded worlds throughout the galaxy with the building blocks of life. But the most shocking revelation came when she saw the architects' final project, faced with their own extinction from some cosmic catastrophe. They had chosen to preserve their legacy in a different way. Instead of trying to save themselves, they had created a new species designed to inherit their knowledge and continue their work. That species was humanity. The visions showed her the process: architect genetic material, carefully woven into the DNA of primitive primates on a small blue world. Mathematical sequences and technological knowledge encoded into human genes, waiting to be activated when the species was ready. The architects had died knowing that their children would eventually take their place among the stars. "Emily." Tom's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Emily, you need to see this." She opened her eyes to find the entire chamber transformed. The console was now fully active, its surface displaying holographic star maps and genetic diagrams that matched her research perfectly. But more importantly, Tom and the other humans in the chamber were staring at their hands in amazement. Their skin was glowing softly with the same light that emanated from the console. "What's happening to us?" David asked, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. Emily looked at her own hands and saw the same phenomenon. The genetic markers she had discovered in human DNA were activating, responding to the presence of genuine architect technology. The artificial sequences weren't just inactive code waiting to be read. They were programs designed to unlock human potential when the right conditions were met. "We're awakening," Emily said, the knowledge flowing into her mind from the console's connection. "The architects designed us to inherit their abilities when we encountered their technology. This is what we were always meant to become." The awakening brought changes that went far beyond the physical glow. Emily found her mind expanding, processing information at incredible speeds. She could sense the thoughts and locations of the other awakened humans in the chamber, creating a network of shared consciousness that allowed perfect coordination without verbal communication. Tom's injuries were healing at a visible rate, his body optimizing itself according to architect genetic programming. David and the other colonists were discovering enhanced reflexes and problem-solving abilities that made them far more than ordinary humans, but the most important change was their understanding of technology. Emily looked at the console and suddenly comprehended its purpose completely. It wasn't just a computer or communication device. It was a key designed to unlock similar systems throughout the galaxy and provide awakened humans with access to the full architect technological legacy. "The other sites," Emily said, her enhanced mind making connections at lightning speed. "Every ancient ruin in the galaxy contains systems like this. The architects left them as inheritance for us to claim. When we were ready." The sound of approaching footsteps in the tunnels reminded them that they were still being hunted. But Emily no longer felt afraid. Through the console, she could sense similar awakenings beginning across human space as other members of their species encountered architect technology or experienced the stress needed to trigger their dormant genetics. General Kex and his forces were hunting two human fugitives. What they were about to encounter was something entirely different. Humanity beginning to claim its true heritage as the architect's chosen successors. "They're coming," Tom said, but his voice carried confidence rather than fear. His awakened senses could track the approaching soldiers with perfect accuracy. Emily smiled as she interfaced with the ancient systems, learning their secrets with each passing moment. "Let them come. It's time the galaxy learned what humans really are." The chamber filled with new light as more architect systems came online, responding to the presence of their intended operators. Above them, General Kex was about to discover that the species he had dismissed as young and weak had been hiding the potential of the galaxy's most advanced civilization in their very blood. The explosion above ground shook dust from the ancient chamber's ceiling as General Kex's forces began their final assault on New Haven Colony. Maria Santos and her defenders had held out longer than anyone expected, but energy weapons were now carving through their barricades like paper. In a matter of minutes, Kex's troops would breach the tunnels and discover the hidden architect site. Emily Watson no longer needed to look at displays or monitors to know what was happening. Her awakened senses could feel the movement of every person above ground, tracking their locations and intentions with perfect clarity. The other awakened humans in the chamber shared the same awareness, creating a network of consciousness that made them more than the sum of their parts. 12 soldiers approaching from the main entrance, Tom Rivers said quietly, his enhanced hearing picking up footsteps that were still hundreds of meters away. "Another group is trying to breach through the colony's water treatment facility." David, Park, and the other awakened colonists had positioned themselves throughout the chamber, but they weren't hiding behind cover like ordinary humans would. Instead, they stood calmly in the open, their bodies glowing with the soft light of activated architect genetics. They looked like statues of ancient gods come to life. "Emily, are you sure about this?" Tom asked. "We could try to escape through the back tunnels. The console has shown you maps of other passages." She shook her head, her hands still connected to the architect control system. Through it, she could sense awakening events beginning across human space as the genetic triggers spread from person to person. Soldiers on distant battlefields suddenly found themselves moving with impossible coordination. Scientists working with ancient artifacts, experienced flashes of understanding that unlocked technologies their species had studied for decades. Children playing near archaeological sites began displaying abilities that terrified their parents. Running won't solve anything, Emily said. If we're going to claim our heritage as the architect's successors, we need to prove that we deserve it. That means protecting the innocent and standing up to those who would suppress the truth. The first group of Kex's soldiers appeared at the chamber entrance, their advanced combat armor gleaming under the ancient lights. They moved with professional precision, weapons raised and scanning for targets. What they found defied every tactical manual they had ever studied. The awakened humans didn't take cover or return fire. Instead, they simply stood where they were and looked directly at the approaching soldiers with eyes that glowed like stars. "Surrender immediately," shouted the squad leader, a tall reptilian warrior whose species had served the Galactic Council for centuries. "You are harboring dangerous criminals and interfering with official council business?" Emily stepped forward, her connection to the Architect console allowing her to access systems throughout the chamber. Ancient defenses came online not to attack the intruders but to demonstrate the futility of their aggression. Energy fields appeared around each soldier, not harming them but preventing their weapons from firing. "We're not criminals," Emily said, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber despite speaking at normal volume. "We're the rightful inheritors of this technology and this knowledge. The Galactic Council has been suppressing human heritage for decades." The squad leader tried to fire his weapon, but the energy field around him absorbed the shot harmlessly. His confusion was visible even through his helmet's faceplate. "What kind of technology is this? Humans don't have access to defensive systems this advanced." "You're wrong," Tom said, moving to stand beside Emily. "Humans have always had access to this technology. We just didn't know how to use it until now." Through the console, Emily could sense similar confrontations beginning throughout the galaxy. Human settlements were discovering ancient sites that had been hidden beneath their colonies for years. Space stations were reporting that human crew members were suddenly able to interface with systems that had previously required alien technicians. Most importantly, the genetic data Emily had transmitted before the Terra Nova's destruction was spreading through human communication networks faster than the Council could suppress it. General Kex himself appeared at the chamber entrance, flanked by his personal guard. The Altarian commander had expected to find frightened refugees hiding in caves. Instead, he discovered something that challenged everything he believed about human limitations. "Impossible," Kex growled, his reptilian features twisted with disbelief. "Humans are a young species. You lack the genetic complexity for this kind of technological integration." Emily smiled, accessing more of the chamber's systems with each passing moment. The awakening process was accelerating, unlocking abilities and knowledge that had been dormant in human DNA for millions of years. "We're not young, General. We're ancient, older than your species, older than the Galactic Council itself. We're the children of the Architects." "The Architects are extinct," Kex snarled. "They died out millions of years ago." "No," Emily replied, her enhanced understanding revealing the truth that the Council had worked so hard to hide. "They evolved, they became us. They encoded their consciousness, their knowledge, their technology into the genetic structure of a primitive species and guided our development across millennia. Every human carries the legacy of the galaxy's most advanced civilization." The revelation sent shockwaves through Kex's forces. Several soldiers lowered their weapons, their training unable to cope with the implications of what they were hearing. The Architects were legendary throughout the galaxy, revered as the mysterious builders of wonders that modern science could barely comprehend, if humans were truly their descendants. Then everything the Galactic Council had built was based on a lie. "Even if that were true," Kex said, raising his own weapon, "the Council would never allow humans to claim such power. The galaxy requires order, stability. Human dominance would upset the balance we've maintained for centuries." Emily's expression hardened. Through her connection to awakened humans across space, she could feel the Council's response to the spreading revelation. Fleets were mobilizing, not just to capture fugitive scientists, but to quarantine or destroy human settlements, before the awakening could spread further. "The balance you've maintained is built on suppressing the truth," Emily said. "But you can't suppress genetic heritage forever. Every time a human encounters architect technology, every time one of us faces a life-threatening situation, the dormant programming activates. We're awakening across the galaxy, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching engines echoed through the chamber from above. But these weren't more Council enforcement ships. Emily's enhanced senses recognized the energy signatures of human vessels, moving faster and more precisely than should have been possible. Commander Roy Blake had arrived with a fleet of Earth ships, their crews experiencing the same awakening that was transforming humans throughout the chamber. The battle for New Haven was about to become the first test of humanity's true potential against those who would keep them enslaved to ignorance. General Kex realized that his simple arrest mission had become something far more dangerous. He was facing not just a few human fugitives, but the emergence of an entire species claiming its birthright as inheritors of the galaxy's most powerful ancient civilization. The age of human servitude to the Galactic Council was ending, and the age of human ascension was about to begin. The holographic transmission flickered to life in the center of the Galactic Council's emergency session chamber, showing Dr. Emily Watson standing before the ancient architect console on New Haven. Her image was being broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited system in known space, carried by communication networks that the Council had built but could no longer control. High Counselor Thane watched helplessly as Emily held up the genetic data that would change everything. Around him, representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence as she began to speak. "Citizens of the galaxy," Emily's voice carried clearly across space and time. "For 50 years, humanity has been told that we are a young species, newcomers to the galactic community who must earn our place among older and wiser civilizations. This is a lie." The transmission showed the genetic comparison charts, the DNA markers, the mathematical sequences that proved human connection to the architects. Emily's awakened abilities allowed her to present the information with perfect clarity, making complex scientific concepts understandable to any intelligent being. "Humans are not young," she continued. "We are the direct descendants of the architects, the ancient builders whose ruins dot the galaxy. Our DNA contains their genetic legacy, encoded with knowledge and abilities that activate when we encounter their technology or face extreme circumstances." Thane felt his carefully constructed order crumbling around him. The secret that the Council had guarded for decades was now public knowledge, spreading through every communication network faster than they could jam the signals. Worse, the awakening Emily described was happening in real time across human space. Commander Roy Blake's fleet hung in orbit above New Haven. But these weren't the same human ships that had left Earth's solar system. The awakened crews were demonstrating capabilities that should have been impossible. Their vessels moved with perfect coordination, executing maneuvers that required split-second timing across dozens of ships. Simultaneously, more disturbing still were the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Human colonists were discovering ancient sites beneath their settlements. Human engineers were suddenly understanding technologies that had puzzled alien scientists for centuries. Human soldiers were displaying tactical awareness and physical abilities that made them formidable opponents even without superior weapons. "The Galactic Council has known this truth for decades," Emily's transmission continued. "They have suppressed archaeological evidence, falsified historical records, and eliminated anyone who came too close to discovering humanity's real heritage. They did this not to protect us, but to protect themselves from the implications of human awakening." In the council chamber, panic was beginning to set in. Representatives from species that had dominated galactic politics for centuries suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that the humans they had dismissed as primitive newcomers were actually their technological and evolutionary superiors. "General," Kex's voice crackled over the communication system from New Haven's surface. High Counselor, the situation here has become untenable. The awakened humans are demonstrating abilities that our forces cannot counter. Request permission to implement final protocols. Thane knew what Kex meant. The final protocols involved the complete destruction of New Haven and everyone on it, covering up the awakening event by claiming it was a terrorist attack or natural disaster. But even as he considered the option, reports were coming in of similar awakenings on hundreds of other worlds. Negative, General, Thane replied. Withdrawal from New Haven immediately. We need to reassess our position. The truth was that it was already too late for cover-ups. Emily's broadcast was being recorded and retransmitted by news services throughout the galaxy. The genetic evidence was being verified by independent scientists on dozens of worlds. Most importantly, the awakening itself was spreading exponentially as more humans came into contact with ancient technology or experienced the stress that triggered their dormant abilities. Commander Blake's voice came over the priority channel, calm and professional despite the revolutionary nature of what was happening. High Counselor Thane, this is Commander Blake of the Earth Defense Force. We're prepared to discuss terms for humanity's new status within the galactic community. New status? Thane's voice carried decades of accumulated authority, but even he could hear the uncertainty beneath it. The status we should have held from the beginning, Blake replied. As the inheritors of architect technology and knowledge, humanity has a responsibility to guide galactic civilization into a new era of cooperation and advancement. Through the council chamber's displays, Thane could see the proof of Blake's words. Human ships were interfacing with ancient orbital platforms that had been dormant for millions of years. Human scientists were unlocking secrets from architect ruins that had baffled researchers for generations. Human colonies were activating defensive systems that made them virtually impregnable, but perhaps most significantly, the awakened humans weren't using their newfound abilities for conquest or revenge. Instead, they were sharing their discoveries freely, offering to help other species understand and benefit from architect technology. Emily's transmission reached its conclusion with words that would reshape galactic society forever. The age of secrets and suppression is over. Humanity claims its inheritance not to dominate other species, but to fulfill the architect's vision of a galaxy united in peace and prosperity. We invite all civilizations to join us in building the future our ancestors intended. The broadcast ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around the galaxy, the reactions were immediate and varied. Some species called for immediate war against humanity before their awakening could progress further. Others recognized the futility of fighting beings who had inherited the technology of the galaxy's most advanced civilization, but most simply watched and waited, trying to understand what this revelation meant for their own futures. Thane looked around the chamber at representatives who had built their careers on the assumption of human inferiority. That assumption was now revealed as not just wrong, but dangerously so. The species they had kept in a subordinate position for 50 years had been the rightful leaders of galactic civilization all along. What are your orders, High Counselor? Asked his aide, a young being whose entire worldview had just been shattered. Thane stood slowly, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The old order was ending, and a new one was beginning whether the council accepted it or not. The only question was whether that transition would be peaceful or catastrophic. Send a message to Commander Blake, Thane said finally. Tell him the Galactic Council is prepared to discuss new arrangements for interspecies cooperation, and contact our archaeological teams across the galaxy. It's time we stopped hiding the truth about the architect sites. As his aide hurried to carry out the orders, Thane looked up at the displays showing human ships moving through space with impossible grace and precision. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when a species finally claimed its true heritage among the stars.